Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Things That Matter with me, Martie McNabb. If you've been following along, if you've come to some of my in person or virtual show and tales over the last over a decade, you know what this is all about. And you know that I never, in over a decade, have ever tired of listening to the stories that get attached to the things that we surround ourselves with, that we adorn ourselves with, that matter, that we keep, that we inherit, that we find, that we get as souvenirs along the way, that we come across, that a good friend gives it to us, or needless to say, one of the reasons why my guest today, Dr. Karen Kramer, and I connected is that we hold on to something that a loved one who has died left with us or we found after their death. And it reminds us of them and the stories, because it's not that things matter, it's the stories that get attached to them that often do. So, speaking of my guest, I ended up having the pleasure this past September to meet Dr. Karen Kramer at the Grief Awareness and Education Conference. I think it was the second annual, correct?
Yes, second annual.
Second annual in Connecticut, in Hartford, Connecticut. So not very far from me. I mean, I was based in Vermont at that moment, so I was able to go down and participate in this. And this is from a woman who I participated in a book that if you've been following along for a while, you also have heard before. It's called Faces of Grief. And I was part of this collaboration for this book. I think it started 2 years ago. So Kate Mullison is one of the fellow authors in this Faces of Grief, but she also is the main organizer of this conference, this second annual conference. And so when I was there, needless to say, lots of things were happening, packed full of activities like most conferences are. It's just like went from one thing to another thing to another thing without much of a breath. And so, anyway, didn't have a lot of time to really hear about Dr. Karen Kramer's important work in the world. I did end up going to workshop the closing ceremony, so I got a little sense of it. But anyway, we decided to follow up with a phone call, and now we're here on this podcast, and I'm grateful to have you here. So without further ado, as you know, this is the time and the section for show and tell, like elementary school. So I am going to pass over the stage and you can take it away, Karen.
I love it. Thank you, Marty. Well, it was so interesting, Marty, when you were asking, like, what is it? What item? And of course, even now I could bring out the cat, right? We have animals that, and strawberry is very much a part of my life and has been for the last 13 years. But you really challenged me to really go far back to find an actual item. And it finally popped in mind yesterday. I really thought, because I really want to show you and those who are watching and listening that this is something not just to pull something off the shelf. Like, of course, I could have brought out my book, which I mentioned to Marty, but I went back and I went back to something that when I was 8 years old. So when I was 8 years old, my family and I was my I'm the youngest of three. My two brothers, my parents and I, and one of my sister-in-laws went to Hawaii for the first time. And while I was there, we ended up spending a week on each of the four main islands. There's eight, but each of the four main islands that are there, Oahu, the Big Island, Kauai, and Maui at that time, with a rental car and two-man tents. I remember coming home with a lot of mosquito bites at that time. But I loved it as an 8-year-old kid. I loved it. And one of the things we did when we were there is we went to the Polynesian Cultural Center. So if anybody's been there, it's a great opportunity to not only learn a little bit about hula dancing, which I happen to have my mug in here. So, hula dancing, for those who are familiar, this is actually an ancient style of hula, awana. So I'll leave it there, but that was for anybody who might not know. So hula dancing, Tahitian dancing, typically from Tahiti, although you'll also find it in Hawaii. And really, it's the Polynesian islands, Fijian, Samoan, Tongan, New Zealand. So all of those that are there, Samoa. So those islands, those Polynesian islands. So while I was at the Polynesian Cultural Center, there was a woman there that was teaching us how to use koi balls. So these are, and in this area, I will not necessarily be able to demonstrate, but the idea on long strings about doing certain things with these koi balls. And it's a Maori dance. So from New Zealand, the Maori is specifically a certain type of dance, and where you're using these and swinging them around in various different ways. And I was fascinated, Marty. I was like, I want to do that. So, of course, I sat there with my 8 year old the best I could, with all awkward, hitting myself in the head and everything else with these koi balls. Okay. Move ahead. It's a year later. I'm 9 years old, and my mom sees somebody who is teaching Polynesian dancing at a local girls' club. Now, my mom, I was raised in a theatrical and musical family. My parents were founding members of, I'm actually in San Diego, California, so I'm on the West Coast. Okay. So my parents are founding members of what's called Starlight Opera out here in San Diego. They were singing, dancing, musical instruments, modeling, all of that. So that's what I was raised up in. And I was starting at age of 4 into tap dancing, ballet, gymnastics, baton, all of that. So when I came across Polynesian dancing, at first my mom's like, oh, this is just another little thing that she's going to do. Well, I was hooked, Marty, not only in the poi balls, because there's much more to this, but I was hooked into Polynesian dancing, specifically hula and Tahitian, so much so that I went professional at the age of 14. So starting with these poi balls, that was the inspiration for it. And yes, I've been on stage. When I went professional, I was on stage for 24 years. Then I took a break to do this thing called travel and having children. And after 7 years, got back into it, just to exercise the hips and the back. I actually stepped out of it here 2 years ago, but it was something that truly has been part of my life, really starting with that first trip to Hawaii and that Polynesian Culture Center, and seeing that woman teaching me how to this awkward 8 year old trying to teach me how to use these poi balls. Now, for just a bit, actually, and again, I'm in short. Um, I'm trying. Oh, a strawberry. You think it's a string? You think it's something that you're gonna? I'm just gonna see if I can do this in a short. Oh, nope, 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 nope. I'm not going to be able to use them in the short area. It's the idea, and again, it's you can imagine, and I really you want to. I'm trying to see if I could do this with a short string. Um, but it's the idea of doing various different things with the poi balls. And again, it's very fascinating seeing the Maori use them on stage, not in a small environment like this with a cat that thinks it's a toy. So that's my thing that matters.
Oh my God. Since 8 years old, you've had that. Oh my God. That is amazing. That's amazing. I've had a couple of dancers, well, not on my podcast, but at my events, my virtual events and live events, that they were dancers and they brought in shoes or they brought in, the dress that they wore or things like that. I've never had anybody bring in basically an accessory like that, like,
Yes.
another thing. And I've never heard of it too. So that is so fascinating. It's so great.
Yeah.
And we share that. I don't think I've talked about it a lot on here, but I share that passion for dance. I've danced since I was born, basically. And got into dancing, country western dancing, and then got into Latin dancing, and then got into Argentine tango, and West Coast swing, like a variety of things. So it brings you joy. You can see it brings me joy. I can see how much joy it brings you as well, and I hope that, the only challenge can be when you go professional, which I never did per se. I went semi-professional. I competed a couple of times in the same-sex, competition field, but sometimes it's like hard to just do it socially. So is there any way that you can stay doing the stuff that you love to do that you learned without it being the pressure of performing? Are you still doing a little bit of that still?
I was actually, which gets into the work that I do. It was my director who started what's called the halau, or the school, the dance school is here, hula halau. She had passed away, and then a couple of years later, her husband passed away, and the daughter who was primarily taking it on went through a period of grief. So my book is actually dedicated to her for part of that. So when she went through that, she ended up the group sort of disbanded a bit. And again, it had been going on for, I want to say 60 years, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to go back and count the years, but a number of decades. And so some of us went off into different dance groups, and many of those that I started with are still in other various different dance groups. Even one of the ones that was under this dance group started another one. And for me, I just got into being busy in other things. But when I got back into it, Marty, I didn't do it for the show. It was very hard work. I mean, it was like during the summer, from spring, from about April through September, sometimes October, there would be shows that I would be doing like Saturday, Friday, sometimes Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And it was very rigorous, and all the costume changes and costumes we made and everything else. But when I got back into it, it was just for the camaraderie and the fun and the exercise,
Yeah.
to do that for the exercise. Now, this is, when I was actively doing it, I had very good posture, because that was the other thing I'll add in here. When I was 11, I was 11. Yeah, when I was 11, I had a chiropractor that told my mom, because I had scoliosis,
Yeah.
that I would be, no, I was actually younger. He said by the time I was 11, I would be put in a brace, because I had a lower back curvature, scoliosis. If I didn't do anything to correct it, I was going to be in a brace. Now, I started Polynesian dancing when I was 9,
Right.
and that actually helped correct my back to
Wow.
the point where I didn't have a scoliosis, because it actually, and it was a lower back curvature, which I have a little bit more of that now because that's
Yeah.
not strengthened, but
Yeah.
it's such great core strength
Yeah.
that it actually helped me in such a way and correct that scoliosis to the point where I didn't have to have a brace. So
Wow.
it's perfect exercise. So yeah, I loved going back for the exercise. Every once in a while, I love getting up to just put on some Hawaiian music or Tahitian music and just dance, depending upon what my interest is at that time.
Oh,
But it's
wonderful.
yeah,
It,
I'm not into going back on. I did go back on stage about a year ago. I will tell you that, for like a friend's retirement party, something
uh,
like that.
Very neat. Very neat. Wonderful. Wonderful. I can see it, like, and it brings me joy. And unfortunately, I lived in New York City for 28 years, and I could dance every night of the week. And in rural Vermont, where I live part-time, and now in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I live part-time, with my wife and mother-in-law, it's really hard to find places to dance. So I'm really missing it. But anyway, this is you brought up a little bit about your book and your first. I think you've got a couple. So I am going to. This is the chance. I'm going to give you the stage again to share with my look and listeners, as I call them, more about the important healing work you do in the world, and how they can learn more and connect, and find out more about you. So give me a minute and you'll have the stage.
Wonderful. Thank you. So yes, and actually, Marty, you mentioned it from the beginning, that sometimes we have certain items that may be passed down to us from somebody who we may have lost. Now, that's not the case that it happened for mine, but grief can be various different things. So I am a grief alchemist as well as a hypnotherapist. So, grief alchemist basically taking any form of grief that we may have and how can we move forward? Now, grief can be anything from not only death and dying, but it can also be a change in relationship. It can be, which Marty and I were talking about earlier, it could be retirement. It could be when we are dealing with somebody who maybe is towards the end of their life. So, anticipatory grief. It can be in becoming an empty nester, change in financial status, a change in career, a change on the number on the scale, the number of gray hairs, the number of candles on our birthday cake, the numbers that show up on our bank statements, whatever it is. There's various different types of grief, right? Where what once was is no longer, and it challenges our sense of identity. So it's not just death and dying when it comes to grief. And my first book that I published here 2 years ago, the subtitle of it is It's Healthy Grief, Normalizing and Navigating Loss in a Culture of Toxic Positivity. That is the title of the book. Okay. So, with this, getting into healthy grief, the idea that we're going to face all different types of grief. And when we can have those healthy conversations to really normalize conversations, for example, when you have a child where little Susie or little Billy are trying out for a sports or the play, to get a role in the play, and they don't get on the team or they don't get that role, as an example, and they're sad, that's grief. They're going for something. Even the loss of a hope and dream is also a grief. So if we can even have conversations and acknowledge versus just like, oh, try, you can go ahead next time, which is almost invalidating somebody else's pain. And that's actually part of toxic positivity when we use a form of positivity to try to override somebody else's pain. So I started that work because as a hypnotherapist, I was finding some individuals who were coming to me with certain ailments, such as ovarian cysts. Let me see, ovarian cysts, there is stage 2 colon cancer and everything in between. But when I was releasing their past traumas, triggers, and limiting beliefs, their bodies were coming back to balance, i.e., healing. Ovarian cysts completely going away, surprising the doctor when they went in for surgery, and the stage 2 colon cancer significantly reducing. So here I realized when we have certain forms of grief and they're not processed, they can settle in our body. And so, my main focus with this work is to help people healthfully process to their various different griefs they have in life. And in back, you see the full book, which is Healthy Grief. That's the original book. It has 30 grief survivor case studies that are in there. But people have been coming to me and saying, hey, can I get this book? Which, by the way, it's a 2-pound, 400-page book, great book. 30 grief survivor case studies that are in there. It's actually used with funeral professionals, therapists, and doctors use it as well. But the one that came out this year and more of gift like is Moving Forward, the Practical Guide to Healthy Grief, which is 111 pages, colorful, great tips, quick references and things that are in there for people to use, even if they are raw in grief or it's been decades that they've been in grief. And the latest is the Oracle card deck that comes along with it, where it doesn't even need to be grief. I call these a splash of hope when we need it most. Colorful deck. I'm all into colors. And you don't need a book for this because all the information is on the back. So when it comes to action steps, reflections, brief information. So whether it is a splash of hope when we need it the most or a dash of inspiration if we're looking for it, that's what these cards are for. So to look at that information, and Strawberry too, she wants in my lap again, is to learn more about the publications or to even talk to me personally. I love hypnotherapy, whether you're going to a past life or this life. I'm always looking for, we're going to look for what may be underneath something for us, a sadness, ailment, is let's get to the root that's underneath that, because that's what I do in regards to hypnotherapy. So all of that can be found on my website, which is drkarenkramer.com. Basically, my name that's showing up here without the dot, KarenKramer.com. And up on the right, if you want to book a call for me, you can easily do that, or there'll be a ribbon right there if you want to learn more about any of the publications that are available for you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I've had some guests on here that have like 15 different things that I have to add to the to the show notes, and it's like I understand it, but it can be confusing. So thank you for pulling it all together into one place, and that is easy for everyone, including me, to add to the show notes, as I will, of course. And I'm so grateful we had this conversation, because I knew about your grief work, but I didn't know about your hypnotherapy stuff. And so that's a new thing, and very important. All kinds of grief, and I think that probably that is, a huge reason why we find ourselves in the state that we're in this country, in the world, is,
Yeah.
you know, toxic positivity, or like basically, one author that I've read, and I'm going to space his name right now, but I connected with him through Let's Reimagine, the site that has all kinds of people who are in the grief space, offering all kinds of resources and workshops and classes and gatherings and storytelling and stuff. It's a platform that just you can list your event at. This one man, he ended up talking, and like I said, his last name Jeff Brown, I believe it is. I know
Okay.
his last name is Brown, and he talked about the spiritual bypassing, the toxic
Yes.
positivity. Um, and I understand that the people in the healing arts and stuff like that have tried to do this, affirmations and all that. And I'm not saying that that's that it's not beneficial, but I'm really glad that we're hearing more and more about this toxic positivity, and spiritual or emotional bypassing, deep stuff, because it doesn't go away unless we alchemize it like you do. So, thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Things That Matter. And I encourage you, as I always do, to think about your legacy, which is much more than your money and your real estate, those numbers that Karen brought up. And realistically, our homes, as you can see behind Karen, if you're watching, you can't see behind me because I just have this. Our homes are our personal museums. And so, when, and if you, that we get so busy, and if you die, I will tell you that your loved ones who walk into your house will be looking at these things and wondering why. What is the story behind that broken vase, or that, the things that we keep around? They matter, not because of them per se, they're the materialness, it's the stories. And we get so caught up in so many things that we forget to tell the stories. So thank you, Karen, and I encourage everybody here to look around and tell the stories of these things that matter. It brings us joy. So thanks so much, Karen. I look forward to dropping this episode, and I will keep you informed. And everyone, have a wonderful day. And thanks so much for listening to this episode of Things That Matter with Martie McNabb.